Welcome to Hollywood Changemakers, a podcast by entertainment industry professionals who want to talk about the issues that impact our culture from a new perspective. Faith, this is Hollywood Changemakers.
Hi, I'm Karen Covell with the Hollywood Prayer Network. Welcome to our podcast, Hollywood Changemakers. Today we're very excited to have a dear friend of mine, a brilliant man who is so involved in leadership in Hollywood that I'm so excited to have him that we are going to have 2 episodes with Shun Lee Fong. So I want to welcome you here to hear the conversation and enjoy your time with Shun Lee. Hi, Shun Lee.
Hello, Karen.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, absolutely.
I know we were joking about how hard it is that we talk together.
We have had many conversations over the years, yes. And they've all been good.
They've all been good.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have.
Yeah.
Well, I love what you do. I love who you are. I love everything about you. And I'm excited to narrow down today a conversation that you and I have had before.
Yeah.
But I think is important for Christians coming into Hollywood. More and more Christians are coming here, and the lines are blurring between doing faith-based projects and doing regular commercial secular projects. Right. And I think some Christians feel guilty to get in the secular market. I think some people don't understand how to live as a Christian in both worlds.
Right.
So let's talk about what you think how a Christian should handle content when they are creating a story.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And part of it goes back to the fact that we've created this dichotomy that doesn't actually exist. It's a false dichotomy that says there's sacred and there's secular, and never the two shall meet. Mm-hmm. And that you have to choose one or the other. And actually that dichotomy goes back to a bunch of dead Greek guys who said that, the gods are up here on Mount Olympus and all of us humans are here down on earth. And we don't talk with the gods, and the gods may throw lightning bolts at us, but that's it. And actually, that was never the way that God intended for our relationship between the divine and what we'll call humans to be. From the very get-go, when we were created in the Garden of Eden, God was down here walking around with us. We were spending time together. There was no separation. And so by creating this false dichotomy, we also have to then make a false choice. Which one am I going to go into? Am I going to go into the sacred, or am I going to go into the secular? And by creating that false choice, we make people have a really tough time deciding what they're going to do as a creative.
It's not fair. And
it's not fair.
On a false premise. You're right.
It's a false premise altogether, and it makes it really difficult. And on top of that, then we have people who judge the people on the other side. They're like, "Oh, you're in the sacred area, and I don't want to be in that," or vice versa. You're in the secular area, and it's all that false premise that's created that. And then we build our kingdoms based off of whether you're in the sacred or the secular, and it just turns into a giant mess. Mm-hmm. And it makes things difficult for artists because they may have a story or a song or whatever it is inside of them that's to the glory of God, and yet it has commercial appeal. And then they wonder, am I doing this for the show? Am I doing this for God? What is this all about?
Am I selling out?
Am I selling out? Yeah. And it gets really ugly. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, because of this false dichotomy, each side has also come up with their own language. Yes. So we have Christians who are trying to talk Christianese, for lack of a better word, so that they can fit within a particular, this sacred side.
Or they say what they think the Christians want to hear.
Right, exactly. And that ends up turning into cliche and ends up just becoming another mess. Then you have people who are like reacting to that. I don't want to speak that language, and so I'm going to go out of my way to speak the language of the world, the secular side.
And that's so unfair to the authenticity of the story.
Yeah.
Because I just saw a film the other day by a filmmaker who wanted to move out of what he felt were faith-based programs that he was making. Right. So made a choice to do a movie that was secular. Mm-hmm. And I watched this movie, and there were elements in it that I saw him put in to make it feel secular. Right. Instead of just telling an authentic story. Right. And not worrying about what the label is on it. Right. And it was very inauthentic to me. Yeah. It was uncomfortable.
Because audiences aren't stupid.
Mm-hmm.
They know what you're trying to do, and we have a word for that. It's called pandering. Mm-hmm. And, one side panders to the other and vice versa, and audiences are not dumb. They know when you are trying to poke their emotional buttons by using certain words. And unfortunately, some people fall for it. And the problem is that we've been at this for so long, this idea of the sacred and the secular being miles apart, and it keeps getting further and further apart, so much so that people in the world no longer know how to speak the language of the sacred, and the people in the sacred side no longer know how to speak the language of the world.
And the divide gets deeper between the two.
That's right. And so you have people who no longer have the ability to communicate beyond their little bubble that we've created, and so it limits the ability for an artist to communicate in a way that resonates to a larger audience that's hungry, maybe for the spiritual. We're hungry as spiritual creation. We're hungry to hear those things, but we also push back against it because we're like, that's just a cliche, and I remember challenging somebody at the greenhouse to define the word grace. And all they could give me was, well, grace is favor from the Lord that's unwarranted. And I'm like, okay, that's what your Sunday school told you.
That's what you learned.
That's what you learned. Now tell me what it is. And this terrified look came over this person's face. They had no idea because they couldn't begin to speak outside of the Christianese bubble. Mm-hmm. And it makes it really difficult then to have an authentic conversation between these two false sides that we've created, and as a result, we become ships passing in the night. How do we get beyond that becomes the question.
Well, that's exactly right. And what I love is your background. You were an attorney. You teach entertainment law. You're a producer. You're an actor. You run a ministry, the Greenhouse. With all these things, you are so intimately involved with creatives that I'm sure you see every end of the spectrum of people trying to figure out who they are, people trying to find their voice, people writing projects and thinking they're fabulous and not really understanding how difficult it is to write a good story. Yeah. And it makes me think, the Impressionist painters, there were a group of amazing, brilliant painters who all loved God. Yeah. They didn't decide if their painting was going to be secular or sacred. Yeah. They painted out of their heart. To be able to express to people in all the areas, the students that you teach, the people that you nurture in your ministry, how do you communicate to them how to find their voice and tell an authentic story without worrying about all these other elements?
Right. And I think part of that is understanding people, understanding humanity, getting rid of the boxes that we put people in, the caricatures that we turn people into. Oh, well, you're an evangelical, so you believe X, Y, and Z, and we just kind of automatically assume that that's what that person believes. Or you're a secular humanist, so this is what you believe. Or you're a Catholic. Mm-hmm. And we start we put labels on them, and we begin to judge them not on who they are, not as people created in the image of God.
And more complex.
Yeah, it's like, I remember a friend of mine, Steve Taylor, said, blaming some of these caricatures for being bad Christians is like blaming a cartoon for bad acting. It's like we created this caricature, and then we want to blame them for not living up to particular standards. Yeah, exactly. Uh-huh. And so I think our job then is to begin to help people to understand what it means to live outside of those boxes that people create. We're never going to be able to stop people from creating boxes. Right. We're just too good at it.
They feel too safe.
That's right. We've had thousands of years of practice of putting people in boxes. But learning to be able to see things through the eyes of other people that are not necessarily in our box or in our tribe. It reminds me of a story. My dad took me to Hong Kong. He's from Hong Kong, and he took me there back in 2002. And he was just showing me his old stomping grounds as a kid, and we went to this church. It's one of the oldest Anglican churches in Asia. And, of course, they speak English there, and there was a funeral going on at that point. And so we had to sit outside and wait for the funeral to get over, so everybody left. And then we went inside, and you go inside, and at the back of the church, the nave of the church, there's this huge stained glass window. And beautiful. It's Christ on the cross. Mary and the mother of Jesus and Mary Magdalene were there. And amazing. The light's shining through, and you're just overcome with the beauty of this work of art. And then I remember going outside after we had wandered around in that church for a while, and we went around to the street, and as we're walking down the street, I realized that we are on the opposite side of that same wall. So I looked up at the stained glass window, and it's just a mess of glass and soldered iron. You couldn't see Jesus in it at all. Yeah. Why? Because the people on the inside could tell, but the people on the outside had no idea what it was about. And what's happened so often is we as artists, we create for people on the inside.
This is
And
so good.
our job is then to begin to think about, well, what are the people on the outside seeing? Are they understanding this? Am I speaking in a language, in an art form that they can understand? It's our job is to step into their shoes for a little while and say, okay, they're not going to get this.
That's right. So how do we communicate it so that they do? Yeah.
Exactly. Because you know what? There's art that is for people on the inside.
There is.
I'm not downplaying that at all. There is a Christian market, and
It's a niche market, like
absolutely,
like ninja films, like martial arts,
Yeah.
horror films. They are solid markets that people will always come to, and they'll
That's
always
right.
be there.
And they know what they're going to get out of it,
Yes.
and that's totally fine.
And they're faithful.
Some of those films are good. Some of them are bad.
And it doesn't matter.
It's all genres are that way, right?
That's it, yeah.
We have to begin to think then about if we are the kind of artist that has a story that needs to be told to the people outside of the church, the people that are walking down the street and looking up at the stained glass window thinking, I have no idea what this is, we have to be able to step into their shoes and say, well, how do I get them to understand what it is that I'm trying to say? Instead of using the cliches of Christian art, to use that false dichotomy again, we have to begin to step outside of it and use not cliches, but begin to speak in a way that people outside the church building are going to be able to understand.
That's it. And you're not going to lose the people in the church.
Hopefully not.
No. And
may
if
get
you
a
do,
little
you don't worry
judgment.
about it.
Yeah, you might get a
don't
little
worry about it.
judgment, but that's...
I always feel like a little judgment from the church makes me feel like I'm right in the right
Yeah, that's
direction.
right. If I'm rocking the boat a little bit,
I must be doing it
I'm
right.
walking in the steps of Jesus, right? He rocked the boat on many occasions.
Oh, that's so right.
Absolutely.
Well, when you are talking to people who are writing a project, who are creating an idea, what are some of the things that you want to recommend to them as they start?
The first thing that comes to mind is don't get ahead of yourself. Like, think through, what is the theme that I am trying to say here? What is it that I'm really trying to communicate? And we've all read the different books like Save the Cat and different ones that say, okay, here are the beats and you got to follow the beats. Well, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe we need to go to a deeper level than just the beats of a story to what is it that I'm trying to say. I know we have a mutual friend, Stan Williams, who's written the moral premise, and he talks about every writer should read the moral premise. It is about getting down to the theme, the moral theme of a story. And so many people bypass that because they're looking for something that just is going to resonate with the market they're trying to hit.
Exciting story points or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why so many faith-based films end up looking the same, or so many action films end up looking the same. They're all trying to hit the same points without looking deeper to what the theme is.
I think it's good if we say to people, why are you writing this story?
Yeah. Because the why motivates it. Right?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. There's a great story about Straight Outta Compton.
Yes.
Where they made the movie. They wanted to tell how hip-hop music started.
Right.
Tell the story, interview amazing hip-hop artists, put the whole thing together, went out for test screenings, and people didn't resonate with it.
Yeah.
So they pulled it back in and said, what is the problem here? And they brought another producer in because they felt too close to it. And the producer said, well, why are you telling this story?
Mm-hmm.
Why was hip-hop created? Not how. We can know the how.
Right.
But why?
Right.
And they realized, it was created because these people didn't have a voice. So they went back and just recut the footage they had and made the why the purpose of it instead of just the how. And it became a huge hit.
Yeah.
And I watched that movie, and I did not like hip-hop music.
Yeah.
And when I was done watching that movie, I had such an appreciation for why hip-hop music got created that even though I don't listen to it a lot, I appreciate it. I understand it. It changed my whole perspective because of that powerful question.
Right. And they didn't have to come out and just say, this is why we're doing this.
No.
It was implicit in the art itself. This is why we're doing it. You could read into it. Like I said, audiences are not stupid.
They're not stupid. We see the artists struggle. We see what they go through in their lives. We see how they needed each other at times. And we can connect the dots.
Yeah, and I think that goes to my next point, which would be that it is okay to hide things. There's a verse in the Bible in Proverbs where it says, it is to the glory of God to hide a matter, and it is the glory of kings to reveal it or to expose it. I always add to it just a little bit, and it is to the glory of artists to hide it again. Our job is to hide those things so that people have to dig for it. Instead of just handing them answers, which is what especially evangelicals we tend to do because we're a preaching-oriented kind of community.
Yeah, we're used to sermons.
We're going to tell the truth.
And we need them to hear it. Yeah.
And actually what we need to do as artists is we need to hide the truth and help people dig for it, because when they dig for it, then it becomes theirs.
Yes.
They own it because they were part of the process rather than just accepting something that was handed to them.
It's so true. And C.S. Lewis says that great stories have mystery.
Yes, yeah.
We have to have mystery. We have to have people think about it and come to a conclusion between them and God, and not have us hit them over the head with something.
Yeah. And I think that people are like, well, what if people don't understand what I'm trying to say? What if they don't get it?
Jesus.
Most of the time, yeah. And he gave them hard knocks for it every once in a while. But, there are movies that I go back to, and music and other things, where I'll go back and it'll be 10 years later and I'll finally get it. I'll finally say, oh, this is what they're trying to say. I'm such a moron that I didn't get it till 10 years later. But when it does happen, it's this epiphany, this revelation. Now it's mine.
That's it.
It's not some artist who told me this is what you must believe. It's that I have the ability to dig for it myself, draw it out, and suddenly what I do draw out is something I own.
Yes, and if you hadn't seen it that first time, it wouldn't have been even a bigger revelation the second time.
That's right. Yeah.
I just had this conversation about the play Our Town.
Yes.
Every high school seems to do Our Town.
That's right.
And the kids never understand really what it's about. No.
That's right.
They learn the lines, they grab onto the characters, they finish the play, they all feel good about it. And then about 10 or 15 years later, how many people go back and see it or read it and go, oh, that's intense.
It's right there.
That's
It's been staring at me the entire time.
That's it, and I didn't get it.
The saints and the poets, we're the ones who understand life, and yet so many times we don't get it till further on down the road.
And that's great work.
Yes.
Because it doesn't catch you right in the face the first time.
Yeah.
You have to live with it. You have to think about it. You have to ponder it.
Yes, and we so often, and it's not just Christian artists, it's artists as a whole, we make the mistake of confusing simple with simplistic. And we so often make our art simplistic because we want people to understand it so badly, and we want them to get it right away and walk out and be talking about, oh, this is what that movie meant. Where sometimes it can be a very simple theme, but it's never simplistic. We should never err on the side of simplistic. We should err on the side of, we'll make it simple, we're going to hide it, and when they do find it, it's going to be something that knocks them outside the head. They really get it.
That's Jesus' parables.
Yeah.
They are not simplistic, but they're very simple.
Very
a woman
simple.
loses a coin.
Right.
She has to go look for her coin.
Yep.
It's a very simple story, but the rich meaning behind it is what's so great. Yeah.
And my fear is that as a church that we've too often made things too simplistic. And this is not to knock anybody in particular or any denomination or anything, but sometimes I'll go into even my own church and they'll hand me a sheet of paper with the 3 points of the sermon, and I'm supposed to fill in the blanks. And I'm like, I can fill in the blanks without listening to the sermon. These are so simplistic. I really don't need this.
Yeah.
And I think we've gotten used to being handed stuff, being handed, this is what I'm trying to say and you need to get it, as opposed to hiding it and letting people dig and struggle with these things. Truth should be something we struggle with.
It should be, and something we never fully get a complete answer to, because it should be beyond our human understanding.
Right.
Absolute truth is bigger than anything we can handle. It's so true.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
I remember a few weeks ago we visited a church and they had the handout with the blanks.
Yeah.
And I was filling in the blanks, and then Jim leaned over and said, they haven't gotten to that yet. Like, oh, yeah, I'm just guessing here. That's
like
pretty.
Mad Libs, right?
That's it. Oh, my gosh. That's so true.
Yeah. A third point that I think I've had to learn the hard way is that not everybody is ready to hear about Jesus. And as Christians, we're so eager, and rightly so. We want people to hear about Jesus. It's a good thing. But not everybody's ready for it. You have to prepare the way of the Lord, right? You have to prepare things so that you can talk about Jesus. I teach at a number of universities. I teach media law and ethics. And I remember at one of the universities, a Catholic university down in Escondido, John Paul the Great Catholic University, they were having their graduation, and the priest who was giving the homily at the graduation ceremony had such a great approach to this. He's like, as artists, what should we do? Should we just go out there and preach Jesus? He said, they don't see the need for Jesus. Why would we preach Jesus to them if they're just going to dismiss it? He's like, they don't believe in Jesus. They don't see any need for Jesus. Jesus was a nice guy who told some pretty good stories, and then his followers went crazy on us. So the idea of preaching Jesus, it may not be time. This is what this priest is saying. So what do? Do we preach Moses to them, preach the law? Do we preach right and wrong, and that there's this code that you need to follow? He said, no, we can't preach Moses to them either, because in our society today, we have this idea of relativism. Yeah,
that seems irrelevant now.
That's right. It's like there is no right and wrong. You have your truth, I have my truth. You have your morals, I have more morals. But don't you dare enforce your morals on me. Mm-hmm. He says, so we can't preach Moses to them because they don't believe in right and wrong. So what do we do as artists? And he said something that really stuck with me. He said, our job as Christian artists is to preach Adam to them. That our job is to remind people what it means to be human. And we've gotten so far away from that. We're so eager to preach Jesus that they're not ready for it. First, we have to show the society that has forgotten what it means to be truly human. Wow. We have to show them what that means by, this is what you were created to be. That may be talking to them about their dreams and their passions. Maybe it's talking about, who their insecurities, what it means to be afraid, what it means to be, confident. What were they created to be? Is there purpose in life? All these things. Once we've done that, then we can preach Moses to them. We still can't preach Jesus to them yet. Right. We preach Moses to them about, well, this is what it meant to be human. We've fallen away from that because we had all these rights and wrongs, and we screwed it up. And now we're no longer operating as humans, and now we're in trouble because we don't know how to get back. Once you talk about that, then you can talk about Jesus as salvation for that.
Our hope.
But we get so ahead of ourselves by trying to preach Jesus before it's time. We need to prepare the way of the Lord as artists so that we can get to that point, and it's a long-term conversation.
And every step of the way is important, and different people fill each step. So you may be the person that just opens a door to Adam. Yeah. You may be a person that represents Moses well. You may be a person that understands Jesus. And it's a process, and we don't have to all cover all of it.
It's a progression. And Jesus was very clear about it. He said, some of you are harvesters, and that's great. Some of you are seed planters. That is, and maybe more so, important than the people who do the harvest. Because the people who plant the seeds are the ones who end up, they have a harder job. They don't get to see the fruit of their labor. They get to plant a seed and have somebody reject them.
Right. No, and they're all tough, but they're all necessary.
They're all absolutely necessary.
They really are.
Yeah.
And I think we have to also focus on, as Christians, God wants us to be excellent. And so to tell a story because we have a message and to get it out because people need to hear it is rushing before, am I doing it the best I possibly can? Yeah. Am I doing it as unto the Lord? Whatever the story is, am I excellent so that I can shine His light to people instead of focusing on my story that I need to tell?
That's right. And excellence may look different for each project. And we have to be okay with that. Mm-hmm. And the beauty of that for us artists, maybe the audience doesn't feel the same way, but for us as artists, is it opens up this whole world of creativity. Now we have this huge playing field. Yeah, there's some fences around the borders, but it's this huge playing field that we get to run and play and create and try things and fail and get back up again and try again. All this area, which is why we became artists in the first place, the joy of creativity. And if we will get back into that place as opposed to, well, I've got to create this thing for this particular market, we're going to get back to that joy of creating. And again, the audience knows when you're having fun. The audience knows when you're enjoying hiding this message for them so they can dig for it. And then they join in the fun.
Yes. Oh, that's so true. Well, tell us at this point how this is all incorporated into your life, what you're doing, what's exciting to you, what you're up to.
Well, I do a lot of things. As you mentioned earlier, I run the Greenhouse, which is an organization that reaches out to artists of all sorts, Christians, non-Christians, all over the world. And so we have the opportunity to form long-term relationships with creative artists and talk about what does it mean to be an artist? What does it mean to be an effective creative professional? So we have people from all over the world that are, especially now with Zoom, we have the ability to sit down with them and mentor them. And sometimes it's just about moving them one step closer.
Yeah.
It's not, okay, now that you've listened to me, are you ready to say the sinner's prayer?
I'm going to change your life.
That's right. This is where it all changes for you. Well, it may be where it all changes for them, but in a very subtle way. And being okay with having those conversations and planting that seed, walking away, knowing that somewhere down the line that seed will bear fruit. So there's that aspect. We field a lot of calls from all over the world. I sit down with people and just kind of mentor them through the process of what is their project. So there's that. I'm producing a number of films myself right now with different people, mostly in Nashville, but also here in Southern California. And so
Don't leave Southern California.
I have no plans to at this point. We do have our a chapter of the Greenhouse that just opened up in Atlanta, so I'll be flying out there fairly soon to meet with them. But yeah, it's a lot of doors opening up. We are, as human beings, we are spiritual beings. We have to approach everyone as a spiritual being, which means that people are hungry for it. If we will take the time to get away from our cliches and from our Christianese and that, we'll have the opportunity to provide something that the world is extremely hungry for and they resonate with. J.J. Abrams at one point said, I don't think you can truly examine life without having faith be part of the conversation. Now, as far as I know, and I don't know J.J., he could be...
His faith is not in Jesus,
yeah.
but he understands faith.
He understands that we are spiritual beings and that we need to have that discussion. People are hungry for that. Yeah. And we have to be okay with having that conversation and doing it in a way that meets them where they are, as opposed to saying, hey, you need to come be where we are and speak our language so that you can get these things that we haven't taken the time to truly learn how to communicate.
That's it. That's it. Oh, we could go on talking forever. You're going to do another episode. We're going to have you keep coming back. Sure. I thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Really check out the Greenhouse. Check out what Shun Lee is doing. He's a leader making an eternal difference and working with people who have the potential to change the world through their stories, their creativity, their entertainment. And so we're excited to talk to him today. So thank you so much. And you have to come back to Hollywood Changemakers.
Definitely.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Hollywood Changemakers. If you'd like to get connected with us, our Instagram handle is @HollywoodPrayerNetwork. Find out more at HollywoodPrayerNetwork.com.